Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Haehaetu Barrett tōku ingoa, no Te Aroa Te Waka, nā te whakaue te iwi, koe te kaiwhakahaere o whānau Lifewise Trust, ki Tamaki Makaurau, me Tarawa hoki. Kia ora everyone and good morning. I was diagnosed at a very young age, at intermediate, with having a vision impairment called retinitis pigmentosa. And I hated it when I got diagnosed because I couldn't see anything in the dark, but I'm really happy today that I've got it because I can't see any of you. So this should make my kōrero a bit better because, you know, I'm just talking to myself, looking out here. I've been asked to speak on this thing called Housing First. And this is my fourth kōrero in 6 weeks around housing in Aotearoa. And as our tuahine said, we hosted in Te Aroa the National Māori Housing Conference, and we had a very large contingency of registrations that attended that conference. Probably one of the biggest for the National Māori Housing Conference that's been held. And for us in Te Aroa who hosted, and my cousin Lauren James and I, the co-chairs of that committee, there was a lot of hard work over 18 months of planning to ensure that people who came to Rotorua to discuss this issue were coming with the paradigm and the whakaaro around solutions forward for our people of New Zealand, for our people tangata whenua, for our people who have moved into Aotearoa, to have what we would call a home, to be able to live in something that we would actually assume is permanent housing, that is safe, that is clean, that is appropriate for our babies to be living in. And the messages that came from that conference were quite clear, not just from the Māori worldview, but the political, the ministerial, the family whaiora, lived experience, volunteers, workforce, that we've had enough of what we've been dished out. And we've had enough of the resources being allocated as per a designed contract. We've had enough of being tired and exhausted as a workforce. So the solutions that we all came together is that, and I love the kōrero of the second to last speaker, the CE of Community Housing down here in Christchurch, that let's just get shit done. And we have to do it. And the minister, who's quite radical, he'll fit in nicely in Ngāti Whakaue, I've decided, to get the business done. So when you come into this conference, Cha, and I'd like to acknowledge the committee who are hosting, because I know it's a big job, Paul and Amanda, that contacted me to be able to come and speak on behalf of the Housing First Collective, but also the mahi that we do at Lifewise. It's a big mahi to come together to really discuss platforms like this and ongoing issues that are happening in our communities. Not just the vulnerable. People think this stuff just happens in the vulnerable communities. Circumstance prevails. It could happen to me, it could happen to you. It could happen to anyone. We just need to be prepared to be able to assist resourcing the demand. So as I look down, I never have notes. I never have notes when I present. They actually confuse me. They really confuse me. I just really go on what the kaupapa is. And today is a really important kaupapa for me to stand and represent. The Housing First Collective in Tamaki Makaurau has had its challenges, certainly in the development phases. Lifewise are a part of this whānau, Visions West, who we've also heard down here, Methodist Mission Alliance, who we're a part of, and our sister, and I'd like to acknowledge Jill and the whānau and the team here, and Nick with the Housing First program, and Link People, who are a part of the WISE group, who are also a national entity. When we first started, we had whānau kāhui tukaha. They were a part of the rōpū mandated by Ngāti Whātua. Housing First Collective, though, isn't just a collective. Housing First Collective is all of us that work in housing. Let's not just contract designed names. Permanent housing, home ownership is where we need to be focused and heading towards. Orake, this was taken 4 weeks ago, that video that we opened with, the whānau in the workforce that have grown since 2019, a strong infrastructure team called the Backbone that is led by Rami and Vicky, keeping us together and connected, to be able to come strong when we present at forums like this, for a common issue, for a very common issue. 2014, 2015, we started these things, particularly in Tāmaki Makaurau, led out by the first team. And Zoe, if you're here, Zoe Trill, that was for us at Lifewise, the first probably trailblazer that ensured that we got out there and got the information right, not with the provider realm, with the lived experience, with whānau that were actually living on the streets, and we'll hear more from these teams, our popo. When we went out and did those counts, nobody wanted to know the housing space. Nobody wanted to know what this thing, homelessness, was. We were like the stink little cousin under the stairs that nobody wanted to hang out with. But if you look at our history around well-being in this country, mental health and addictions, social exclusion, social outcast, domestic violence, poverty, food poverty, child poverty, none of this is new, but this thing called homelessness had the biggest stigma and discrimination ever. They were those ones. They prefer to live on the streets. They're out there getting wasted. They're out there drinking and everything like that. That's who we were back then. And then as we started getting committed and understanding what we needed to do to solve this issue called homelessness, we had to go overseas. We had to go overseas and learn this model called Housing First, where family whaiora, where whānau from the streets voice led the paradigm of provision. Very different model. This is the highest complexity that we work with, the most undesirable group, the ones that have been evicted from every tenancy agreement heard of, the ones who are constantly using alcohol and drug for survival, the ones that know they're not included anymore in what we could call a basic whānau hui, because they're those ones. So we got all sent over and learnt this international model. We got pretty smart and brought the actual professor back to come and teach us about this model. We all got trained in terms of the collective, and then we had to find a workforce that were fit for purpose to be able to work with the complexities of the group. But when you bring an international model into a country that has already been led by colonisation, we have to understand how do we ensure that this model fits us. One is tangata whenua, one is the people that we serve, but more importantly, as us as a country to come together and work collectively, because that wasn't happening at all. So when I give the update around this, we had to come from somewhere. So Tāmaki, we learnt this model called Housing First under the collective. The CEs worked together to form it. Our first government funding for Housing First came from National. They started it. They gave us the first mill to put that into our communities. We had to have an ongoing, because you start something, the thing that happens with our people, all these pilots that happen, they start getting into something and then it gets taken away. And then they get all confused again, and that's where we see the relapse. So we have to take some responsibility around ensuring that when we are being accountable to a program that we've brought from overseas, that we're working collectively together to implement it into our communities. Uli Te Aho at the National Māori Housing Conference said he'll work with anyone who funds anything. He said that quite clear. No whakamā there. That's how we have to be, because in order for us to keep our people housed, in order for us to keep our babies out of these motels, we have to do the tick box. That's just how it rolls. But in order for us to be able to ascertain that the outcomes that we're getting are for our people, we need to be working together and making more influential decisions on their behalf. So the Housing First program has provided license for us to do that. But it's the Housing First program. You're working with commercial teams who do not understand the complexity of the cohort. So the workforce is having battles just with the commercial agency in representation of working for their whānau. We have to stop that. If you're coming in as a chip, come in with your eyes wide open. Come in with your eyes wide open. Because I see chips popping up all over the country. But the chip leadership has to understand it's not just about the pūtea. These are people's lives, and they're not the most desired whānau. I know this for a fact. And I'm battling all the time with our chip partners. MHUD, MSD, all the government agencies, I normally stand here and kind of kill yous off, but I'm not today. Because I've come to recognise I actually like you and I need you. I like you, Andrew. But in order for the partnership, even the highest level of leadership knows when to give up the stubbornness, knows when to work in partnership. In Te Aroa, we have created the first housing accord group. We did that because we were sick of being painted all over the media as the highest level of emergency housing. The horribleness of what the public saw of us in our community was not Te Aroa, was not the community providers that serve in Te Aroa. The motel space saturated in our main street that was usually known for tourism. We came together, central government, lobbied, the MHUDs, the MSDs, all came together, and the decision-making level now is with us as Te Aroa, Ngāti Whakaue, central government and MHUD. You want to talk partnership? That's the reality. We have to be at the decision-making levels in order to get our people out of this thing called emergency, transition, sustaining, all the rest. So how does this all fit into the Housing First, Haehaetu Barrett? Where does this all come into play? Housing First kaupapa is around permanent housing, support services, client-led. They don't have to be house ready. They're already coming with everything that we would call damaged. Damaged wairua, damaged henenaro, damaged whānau connection. They are this group. It is generational trauma. They've known homelessness all their lives. They've known it. They know it so well. They know which motel to go to. They know which provider to go to. They know how to come in. They know when you're evicted from one, how to get into the next one. Very smart. But we have to understand that that is the complexity of the cohort that we have committed to support. So we have to build the workforce to meet the demand of the complexity for this program to stay sustainable. I heard yesterday when I was listening to Helen and the wahine tour of the coalition of our women and the 67-year-old hustler outside the countdown. We've all got that 67-year-old hustler in all of our countdowns throughout all our communities. That same kuia is sitting there, and we've all watched it. We've got a pakeke issue, kaumātua, elderly, that have probably served their time in their communities and with whānau. What's happened? How do they come in and access this thing called the Housing First program? How do they do that? It's around how we connect. It's around how we work with our partners. It's around how we address as a collective what we're going to be doing. So as I look down here, these are the leaders, the top photo of the Auckland Housing First. I can see Fiona Hamilton, link people, big teams throughout the motu. Big mahi, Helen, our ACM, gave the kōrero yesterday, gave a brilliant kōrero prior to the budget around the reality, feet to the fire, feet to the fire. Think about that, because we take the heat, we're the front footers. Lisa, Visions West, all that mahi that happens within that kaupapa, connecting down here, ensuring that these collectives are working together. And me, I just joined up, and look at me talking here. But I've done my time in the sector, I got some fruit. But I know that I was asked to represent our whānau because I'm that one. And I don't mind being that one. And I don't mind being put in between ministers, because the voice of our people can come through a collective and the outcomes can be measured. They can and they are. But this voice at a platform like this will be remembered, like it was at the National Māori Housing Conference, like it was up at Ōrākei when we came together as a collective, because the message is consistent. Our people need help now. These resources need to be released now. Give them to us. Get out of the way. Let us do what we do. Let us support our whānau-led services. Let us still believe that even the worst of the worst that come into a thing called Housing First have hope. If they're supported well, we can support into alcohol and drug services if we know how to coordinate and work cohesively as a collective. So my kōrero today, I don't know if I covered anything that Rami gave me. He will tell me after this, but on behalf of the mahi, and not just the Tāmaki collective, but all the mahi that all of us are here for, we are the collective. Every single one of you sitting in these chairs, in this auditorium, down here in Waipounamu, down here in Christchurch, we are the collective. We are the hope. We are the ambassadors of hope for people who are seeking light again, for people who just need to be trusted again. Get our people out of these motels. Get our people into permanent housing. Introduce that home ownership isn't something you can't do, because you can if you're supported and coordinated the right way. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.